In this video, we'll create an animated responsive website with HTML and CSS. Okay guys, so let's go ahead and take a look at the gym responsive animated website. So if we look underneath the logo, navigation, and image slider that we're seeing here, there's white space, but as we scroll down through the website, you're going to see that these different sections kind of animate into the screen, going from any which direction, and later on in the video, you'll learn how to customize the animation to add your own effects and animate any section of the website you want. So let's go ahead and just run through the website again so we can get a feel for the layout that we're going to create. So up at the left hand corner we have the logo, we have our navigation off to the right, then the image slider beneath it that's going to display at 100% of the screen. We have 3 column sections underneath with some icons I'm going to show you how to add and customize as your own. Then we have an image section and a list with facility amenities off to the right for the gym, followed by some more 3 column sections with titles, images, and text. And then at the bottom in the footer we have these social icons and a second navigation to send us to different pages from the bottom of the website. So let's go ahead and just scroll up and get a feel for how the website is going to respond when we size it down to tablet and mobile versions. So when we get down to about 768 pixels, it's going to transform to a single column layout with a drop down navigation at the top. And then when we get it even smaller, down to about 470 or so pixels, the text and titles and such will get a little bit smaller. So we're going to have some transforming twice as we size the website down from the desktop version down to the mobile version. Alright, so let's size it back up, and then we'll take one more look at how the website is going to appear for us on an iPhone 7, for example, and give you a feel for the navigation that we have here. Okay, so let me go ahead and size this up. And let's take a quick look at how it will appear on the iPhone 7. So you're not looking at a whole full height web browser here when checking out the website. So the sections will animate on the mobile version also, and as I said, later in the video you'll learn how to customize the animation, and I'm going to show you the tool that we're using so you can use a bunch of different animations on the website. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started. The one thing that you'll need to get started with the tutorial will be the tutorial starter files that I'm going to link to in the description of the video. So if you just click the starter files link, you're going to get prompted to download these starter files on my website. So just pause the video for a moment if you need to go get the starter files, and then once you do, open up index.html in your web browser so we can see what we're working on as we're doing the tutorial. I'm using Google Chrome for my web browser, just so you know. And then open up index.html and style.css in your text editor. So I'm using Sublime Text. I think Sublime Text 3 is out now though. And another great program you could use that's totally free and works on any type of computer is called Brackets. Okay, so here I have index.html and style.css open in Sublime Text, and let's take a minute or two just to go over what's already included for us in the starter files. Okay, so later on when we get started with the CSS, we'll go over the content that's included in style.css for us, but let's start from the top of our document here and get to know the HTML. So at the very top, which spans the whole website, we have the HTML tag itself with doctype HTML. Then underneath the language tag, we have our head section, and then the body section. So the body section is where we're going to put all of the content for the website, but the head section underneath the language tag here is where we tell the web browser how we want the website to display and reference all the necessary files. So at the top we have our character set there, UTF-8, which is a standard character set across the web. Then we have a Internet Explorer Edge compatibility meta tag, followed by the viewport device width initial scale 1 for mobile websites. And let's take a look at where the title of the website will display. So if you look just above where your website appears on your web browser, the tab at the very top where it says the Gym Personal Training is where the title of the website will show up. And you could change that to whatever you like from the Gym Personal Training. So let's go over some of the other files that are referenced beneath that. So the next couple of files are our CSS files, and first off we have the style.css that we already have open, and that's not in the CSS folder. But if you look at the BX slider and font awesome CSS files, you'll find that they have CSS / because they're in this folder. So we have jQuery.bxslider.css for the slider, font awesome CSS, which I'll get to in just a second. And then we have the animate and waypoint CSS files for the animation that we'll add later in the video, so you don't have to worry about those just yet. So beneath the font awesome style sheet, we have some jQuery links referenced, so we can have some of the plugins display properly. And then inside of the JS folder we have our slider jQuery file right here that's already added for us, and then the waypoints jQuery files, which again we'll get to later on when we add the animation. The fonts folder, don't worry about that. That's for font awesome, which we referenced here with the CSS, and that's going to allow us to display the icons that you're seeing inside of the blue circles, as well as the social media icons that are at the bottom of the website. So inside of the IMG or image folder, we're going to find the logo for the gym, as well as the hamburger icon for the navigation. All of the rest of the images inside of the website that we use are already uploaded to the internet, so you don't need to worry about getting those image files. So those will display right on your computer just as they are mine, since we'll be linking to them with them already uploaded to my website. Okay, so now we are ready to get started. The first thing that we're going to do is we're going to create our header. So that's the blue bar that we're seeing with the logo as well as the navigation in it off to the right. So we're just going to start off with the HTML5 tag header, and then make sure you close the header tag, and then we'll give ourselves a little bit of space so we can add a few things in here, starting with the with a wrapper or inside tag. So basically the main header is the blue section that we're seeing displaying 100% of the screen, and then we have the gym and the navigation displaying kind of centered on the page, as well as some other sections in the website. So it's going to display at 1200 pixels at the full width, but we want the blue section at the top to go 100%. So inside of the header itself, we're going to create something called header inner that later will give a max width and center it on the page to contain the logo and the navigation, so it doesn't stretch at 100% width when we have a wide version of the website displaying on a desktop computer. So just write div ID for divider ID, header inner, and make sure you close your div, and then we'll get started with the logo. So we're going to reference the gym logo, or actually later in the CSS we'll actually be referencing the image, but for now we're just going to kind of set it up so we can reference that later. So we'll do a link, which is the ahref or a tag in HTML, and then make sure you do ID logo. So basically with that link to index.html, whenever we click on the logo, it's going to send us back to the home page of the website. Alright. So now we can drop down and get started on the navigation next. So keep in mind that if it doesn't seem like I'm explaining stuff that thoroughly when we're writing the HTML, once we do the CSS, it's going to be a much more in-depth explanation to these tags. So go ahead and write nav or NAV for our navigation. And then under that we'll do another A tag. So just write A. And if you see the tag appear here in Sublime Text and just hit enter, it will add it automatically for you. So ahref, and we'll do a hashtag because we don't want this link to send us anywhere, and then add an ID, and we'll just call it menu icon. So just like the logo that we did, later in the CSS we're going to tell it to display the icon right here. Okay, so now let's add the unordered list for our navigation. So each link for the navigation will be inside of a list item, and in order to get list items we have to create an unordered list. So UL, open and close, and then do LI for our list items, and then inside of the list item write ahref index.html, and then let's add a class which we'll style later again in the CSS, and we're just going to call this current. So this is going to set the home link apart from the other links because that's the page that we're on with the class current. Okay, and then add another list item and link with ahref, and for the rest of the navigation links, so about, facility, pricing, contact, instead of linking to index.html or another HTML document, we'll just add the hashtag for the link, which won't send us anywhere, as you know, because we're just creating index.html for now. Okay, so just go ahead and add about, facility, pricing, and then the ahref hashtag, and this one is for the pricing navigation item. And then the last one is contact. Okay, so now we have some stuff displaying on the version that we're working on. So if you refresh your web browser, we have all of our navigation links displaying here just in plain HTML. Alright. So the next thing that we'll do is let's drop down underneath the header and add our navigation content. So if you see the note or comment here in HTML where it says add image slider here, you can just delete that and we'll get started with our image slider content. And let me just make this easier to see. Okay, so go ahead and let's start off with a div class that will contain the image slider itself, and we're going to call that div class slide-wrap. Okay, and then create a little bit of space, and then we're going to add a section class inside of that. And we're going to call this section class slider. Okay, and then inside of the section class, we're going to have our unordered list. So similar to the navigation where we have an unordered list and list items, each image inside of the image slider will be nested within a list item. So we're going to give this unordered list a name rather than just writing UL, similar to the navigation up there. And we're just going to call this UL class slider 1 without any dashes in there. Okay, and then you can close out your unordered list and we'll add the list items for the images. So again, it's li, and then the image tag is just img. So here in Sublime Text, if you just write img and then hit enter, it's going to enter the whole image source tag there for you. And in the description of this video, I'm going to have these image links there, so you don't have to type all of them out. But I'm just going to type them out myself for now. So the first one is https www.w3newbie.com/wp content/uploads/chestfly.png. Okay, and then if we refresh our browser, we'll have our first image appearing. So there we have somebody doing the chest fly workout. And let's go ahead and add the second image here. So once again, create a list item tag and then the image or image source tag. And this is going to be basically the same URL for the previous image. So I'll just type this out. But after uploads, rather than having it as chest fly, write push ups, so push-ups.png. So pushups.png. Okay, and then we'll drop down and add the last two of the images. So again, write list item or li and then image source. And if we refresh, just making sure we have the other image display and the link is correct. But once again, these links will be in the description of the video if you want to just copy and paste them right into your website. So the third one is inside-gym.png, and then let me just add the fourth, and then we'll refresh and check out all the images displaying on the version of the website that we're working on. So the fourth is just training.png after uploads. So let me go ahead and refresh, and then we can navigate through all 4 images here. Okay, so now going back to the original version of the website here, we can drop down underneath the image slider and get started with the main sort of body section of the website. Okay. So the first thing that we'll do is we're going to create something called a div class clearfix. So later in the CSS, we're going to add kind of an invisible horizontal line that will create some separation for us in between the sections. All right. So the next thing that we'll do is similar to the inner or header inner that we added inside of the header. we're going to kind of have an intersection for the main body of the website, so things don't display at 100% and keep flexing with the website. So we can have a max width around the sections in the body of the website. So let's call that div ID inner dash wrapper. Okay, and then you can close out the div. So this is going to span the whole website other than the footer at the bottom. So what I'm going to do is just create a quick note or comment in the HTML saying that this is where the inner wrapper ends, just so we don't have that kind of div at the bottom of the website and we don't know what it's for later on after we've added a bunch of content to the website. Okay, so end inner wrapper, and then you can create some space for you if you like inside of the inner wrapper to add the content, and we'll get started with the first of our body sections here. So these are going to be the 1/3 sections. So just write section class 1-3rd, and then you can open and close the section. And the first thing that we'll do inside of the 1/3 section here is we're going to create this kind of circle, the blue circle. So later we'll add the actual color to it, but for now we're going to create a div class and just call it circle. And once our div class circle is laid out, inside of that we're going to add the actual icon. So our icons will be nested within a table data tag, which is the TD tag, which will allow us to center it really nicely later in the CSS. So to reference the icons, what we're going to use is the I tag. Now in HTML, the I tag really stands for italics, but Font Awesome, which is the plugin that we're using to display the icons, references the icons using an I class. So this one is I class FA space FA dash users, and then close out that I tag. So that's for this icon here with the 3 people or 3 users, and the Font Awesome icons that we're using to display inside of the blue circles will be the same type of icons that we use for the social media ones at the bottom of the website in the footer later on in the video. So just remember to close out the div class circle there. And then we can drop down and let's add a heading 3 tag for grade A staff. So as you probably know, in HTML we have heading 6 being the smallest up to heading 1 being the largest. So I believe in this video we're going to use H3 and H5, maybe an H4 in the footer. So now for the P tag, I'm just going to paste this paragraph text in here in the paragraph tag. So you can write this out if you like, or you can use some placeholder dummy text if you want. And once that's added, we're going to go ahead and add another 1/3 section. So we can move over to a convenient location section that's in the center. So here, if we refresh the version we've been working on, we have our user icon, the H3 or heading 3 with grade A staff, and then the paragraph text underneath that. Okay, so let's move over to a convenient location, and I'll just bring up the mobile version so we can kind of see both of these at once that we're going to add now. Alright, so let's add our second section class 1/3, and you can create some space there if you like for the circle class. So section class 1-3rd, and then inside of that div class circle. Okay, and then we'll add our icon. So remember the table data tag and then iClass. And this one is a map marker. So it's going to be called FA space, and here is the map marker, FA space FA dash map dash marker, and then close out the quotations as well as the opening and closing I tag for the icon there. And then we can drop down underneath the circle class or div class circle and add our heading 3 for the a convenient location text. So you don't need to worry about capitalizing this text here, because in the CSS we're going to give it a style, a text transformation uppercase, which will make it display in all capital letters. And then I'm just going to paste this paragraph text in here. Again, you can write it out if you like, or use some dummy text for now. And let's see that it's displaying for us on the version we're working on. Okay, so there we have the map marker, a convenient location, and the paragraph text. Alright, so now let's move over to the last 1/3 section of this part of the website. So drop down, and we'll again want to add the class 1/3. Okay, so class 1/3, and then we'll do again the div class circle, which will allow us to add the blue circle later. And let me actually change, I messed up, should be section class rather than div class for the 1/3. Alright, and then let's do our table data tag, followed by the iClass, and this one is going to be a check mark with a square in it that's opened. So whenever you have kind of an open icon, there's going to be an O at the end. This one is FA dash check square, check mark square, or just check square, dash O, because it's open with kind of the, you can see the blue inside of the icon, sort of. Alright, and then close out that I tag, and we'll do the heading 3 for check us out dash free. Okay, so check us out dash free exclamation point, and then last but not least the paragraph tag for that content underneath the heading 3. So I'll just paste this in here once again to save us a little time. Alright, so underneath this 1/3 or 3 1/3 sections, let's see that it's displaying. What we're going to add, and there it is, the bottom. What we're going to add is a, let me just add a break here, so that it's going to allow a little space at the bottom, because some of that is displaying off of the screen recording view here. You don't have to add that BR break tag at the bottom if you don't want. So as I was saying, underneath these 1/3 sections, what we're going to do is create kind of an invisible horizontal rule on the web page. Again, actually, because we actually did this earlier, called div class clear fix. So that's going to make it so none of these will display inside of that line or over top of that line, and later we'll add some padding to kind of separate out our sections with the div class clear fix. So in the CSS later we'll use the style clear both and give it some padding. So let's move over to this image here, the circular image on the left, and what we'll use to have it display is the HTML5 tag called article. And then inside of the article tag we'll just do an image source tag for that gym class's image. So you can write this out, or you can use the image URLs I put in the video description. So just remember w3newbie.com, WP content uploads, and this one is gym-classes.png. So the article tag, you might be wondering, that's usually used for kind of the 2/3 section to the left of the website for blog layouts, for example, but since the image here takes up most of that left column section, we'll just use the article tag here. And let's give this a class, and we're going to call it circle-image. So later we'll use that class to give it kind of the circular feel there with some style. And so right now it's displaying as a square. So you see if you kind of highlight it, it's still square, but the style is going to cut the edges. Alright, so let's add the right section now, and what we'll use for this is the aside tag. So as you may have guessed, with HTML5, the article tag, you kind of have the 2/3 section on the left, and the aside tag is kind of the 1/3 section on the right. So we'll just take advantage of that tag here. And then we'll add our heading 3 for the our facility text. And then let's add a break tag, because we want a little bit of space before we get onto the list that's underneath it. So just write BR, that's going to create a line break or space. And let's add our unordered list. So this is going to be a unordered list similar to what we did for the navigation, but it's not going to display in line later on. So we'll give this unordered list a class, and let's call it gym. And then, as you know, inside of unordered lists we have list items. So we'll write for our list items LI, and then you can open and close the list item tag, and then we'll have heading 4s or heading 4 tags to display this text that we're seeing here, which is going to be a little smaller than the heading 3s we've been using. So the first one is unlimited Wi-Fi connection, and then let's just make sure everything is displaying here. Okay, there we go. As you can see, it's a little smaller than the heading 3 above it by default. And drop down, and let's add the next list item and heading 4 within it. And this one is member music requests and or ampersand sign. So we'll do that the HTML5 version of it. So write the ampersand signed amp semicolon and then voting. Okay, and then add the third list item and heading 4. And this one is open 24 hours / 7 days a week. Okay, so open 24 hours / 7 days a week. And remember, the capitalization doesn't make a difference here because we'll give it a text transformation uppercase style later on in style.css. Okay, and then the fourth is cardio machine movie theater. Alright, so that looks good. We have our unordered list displaying down here. Later on, we're going to kind of center that inside of the aside section there. And let's drop down and do we're going to want to do another div class clearfix to create that horizontal rule with some padding later on. So just write div class clearfix, and then we'll do some more 1/3 section classes here. So we'll have heading 3s, images, and then paragraph text underneath. Okay, so let's start the first 1/3 section class here. So again, we'll use the section tag and write section class 1/3, and then drop down and we'll start with the heading 3 for the ladies section here. Alright, so ladies section, and then let's add the image that's underneath that. So as you know, it's image source. If you just put IM and hit enter, Sublime Text should recognize it. And I'm just going to write out the URL here. It's www.content/uploads/ladies-gym.png, or I'm sorry, .jpg. That's right. I think all of the remaining images are JPG, actually. Alright, so let me just copy this paragraph text here, and we'll paste that in. Okay. And that's our first 1/3 section, so it's pretty simple here. Let's go ahead and just see that it's displaying in the version we're working on. Okay, so there we have our heading 3, the image, and then the paragraph text underneath. Alright, so let's add the next one, which is the gym floor here. So again, let's add our section class 1/3. So section class 1/3, and then let's add our image, so image source, and this one is w3newbie.com, whoops, then WP content, uploads, and it's pretty self-explanatory. This one is just gym-floor.jpg. And I skipped over the heading 3, but we'll add that in a second. So let me just grab the paragraph text here for our gym floor. And then let's add the heading 3 where it just says the gym floor. And I'll just do this all lowercase. Alright. And let's add our last 1/3 section, at least before we get to the footer. This layout is made up of a number of 1/3 sections, which is great because it's going to be really easy to style all of them at once later in the CSS. So section class 1/3, and then the heading 3 free weights. Okay, and then the image source. And I'll just write this one out. So this one is going to be WP, so WP-content uploads /free-weights.jpg. So free weights .jpg, and then let's add the paragraph text underneath that inside of the p tag. So I'll just copy that from the mobile version here, just above the footer, which we're going to start in just a moment. Okay, so underneath this last 1/3 section, let's add another div class clearfix, and that will allow us to have some padding in between the 1/3 sections and the footer underneath it. Alright, so let's check to see that we have the free weights image and text here, which we do. And then we can drop down and get ready to lay out all of our footer content, which is where the gray section starts here. Okay. So for the footer, we're going to use the HTML5 tag footer, which is pretty self-explanatory. So just drop down and open and close your footer tags. And then what we're going to do also before we add our footer content is we're going to end the inner wrapper. So if you remember, we have that area where all of the info is contained inside of a certain width on the website when we size it up past, say, 1200 pixels here. So we'll want to have this end above the footer section. So just underneath the section class 1/3 and above the clearfix div class, close the end tag for the inner wrapper. And then let's add a quick note or comment in HTML here saying that this is where our footer section is starting. Okay, and then inside of the footer section itself, we'll also have a wrapper, so the sections in there stay at a certain width. So that will contain the 1/3 section similar to how it does above. So the footer HTML5 tag itself will allow us to create the gray background, and then we'll center all the content in there with this div ID, which we'll call footer-inner. Okay, and then you can close that out, and that's going to span the entire footer here. And inside of that, let's go ahead and start our footer 1/3 sections. Okay, so let's start the first one here on the left, which is the contact section. So just write section class, so section class 1/3, and then we're also going to give this section class an ID, and the ID is going to be called footer-third. So the footer third ID will allow us to style it a little more individually for this section class and give it that line that we're seeing to the right of only 2 of the 3 sections. So the third one doesn't have it, as you see. Alright, and then inside of the 1/3 class here, let's add our heading 3 for the contact text. And then let's add the paragraph text, and we're going to give this a class, and we'll call it footer contact. So p class footer contact. And then let's start with the paragraph text here. So we're going to give these line breaks using the BR tag. So just go ahead and do the first line, which is the gym, and then BR, and we'll drop down to the next line. You don't have to drop down to the next line here, but I think it makes it easier for us to look at. And let's do a B class for bold, or you can use the strong tag, which is actually preferable in HTML5, but that's alright. And we're just going to call this class phone, to make the phone number bold here, and then add 2 breaks after the phone number in bold to create that separation between the phone number and the address underneath it, which we'll add now. So it's 500 Washington Road, which is totally made up, and then add another break, and then Seattle, Washington 98101. Okay. Alright, so that does it for our first of the 1/3 sections here in the footer. And then if we refresh, there we have our heading 3 and then the address with the bold phone number mixed in there. Okay, so let's move over to the second of the 1/3 sections here, and this one will also have the ID in it. So let's do a section class 1-3rd and then we'll give it the ID footer -3rd. Okay, and then we'll give the heading 3 that title which says social in the center there. So H3 and inside of it write social. Alright, so now let's do our unordered list. So similar to our navigation here, just had a break in between the heading 3 and the unordered list that we make. Similar to the navigation, we're going to have another unordered list. And this one, instead of calling it the gym, for example, from kind of the gym amenities that we had above, we're going to give this one a class and we'll call it social. So UL for unordered list. And that's UL class social. Alright, and then within that, as you know, we're going to have our list items. So inside of these list items, we'll have links and then icons inside of the links. So as you know, the link in HTML is the A tag or ahref. So ahref and then equals in quotations. You'll have your URL. So I'll just copy this link to my Facebook page or the W3 Newbie Facebook page. And also for these links, let's send people to a different tab than the website or our website that they're on. So in order to do that, send people to a different page or tab, we'll just add target_blank inside of there, as opposed to not having anything or using target_self to keep people on the same page. Alright, and then inside of the links, similar to what we did for the icons above in the first of the 1/3 sections, we're going to use the I class here, and it's going to be the Facebook one. So just open and close your I tags, and then I class equals FA space FA dash Facebook. Okay, so let's go to the version we're working on here in Google Chrome and see that it's displaying at the bottom. Alright, so there we have the tiny little Facebook icon, and that's going to link to my page here, or the W3 newbie page. And now let's go and add the next icon, which is Google+. So just drop down and once again do the list item tag and then the A tag or ahref, and I'll just copy and paste my Google+ page in here and add target underscore blank, to send people to a new tab. And then let's add the I class for Google+. So it's pretty self-explanatory for all of these social media icons here. So this one's just FA-Google-plus. Okay, and then let's just see it down here. Okay, so there we have it. And then we can add the Twitter icon followed by YouTube. So I'll just get that link in advance here and then do the list item and the link ahref, and then I'll just paste that link in here after target underscore blank, and then inside of the A tag, this one will be I class FA space FA dash Twitter. Alright, so there we have our Twitter link. Okay. And let's do, last but not least, YouTube. So list item, ahref, and I'll just type my YouTube URL out here because it's pretty easy. So youtube.com/user/DrewOnQ, and then target underscore blank. So this one is I class FA space FA dash YouTube. All right. And let's go look at all of our finished unordered lists here. And I'll just move these over so they're not taking up 3 lines because it looks kind of confusing when each list item is on 3 different lines there. So here, if you wanted to copy it all out, just pause the video for a second so it's easiest for you to see everything on an individual line per list item. Alright, so let's look at all these links, and here we have the YouTube link last, and whoops, I put a dot in here, or period, rather than a /. Okay. Alright, so there we have the YouTube link working properly. And now let's go ahead and move on to the last 1/3 section here. And this one we're going to give a different ID than the previous 1/3 sections here in the footer. So we'll start it off with section class 1/3 again. or 1-third. And then rather than doing the ID footer-third, this one is footer-third-last. All right. And let's add our heading 3 for the pages text here. And then we'll do a break, and then we're not going to do a unordered list here. What we'll do is we're just going to nest all of these links inside of a heading 5 tag, and then we'll put the links on their each individual line underneath it. So the first one, whoops, we'll just drop down, and the first one is going to be the home link. So ahref, and we want the home link to link us back to index.html. So I'll just have that in there for a link, and we'll keep people on the same page by leaving target_blank out. And then drop down, just remember to do that little dash there, so we can have the dashes in between if we want to match it exactly to the original. And then let's do the next link, which will be to the about page. So since we don't actually have an about page right now, you could just put a hashtag in there or $, which will be kind of a blank link. It's not going to send people anywhere. All right. And then I'll just write the rest of these out real quick here. Okay, and I forgot the about one. So ahref and then hashtag about. And then I'll just add the little line in there. Okay, so here we have our links at the bottom. And the last thing that we'll do for the page here is we're going to create a second little footer section. And this will be for the socket. So there's no HTML tag for the socket, but a socket is basically that little tiny section at the bottom of a website where people have their copyright or their terms and conditions and that type of stuff. So what we'll do is we'll use the footer tag again, and we're just going to give this one a class to separate it from the original footer tag that we did above. So that's going to be for the darker gray section down here. All right. So let's call that footer. So footer class second, because it's the second footer tag we're using. And then all we need to do inside of that is add a paragraph tag for the gym sort of copyright symbol here. So let's add a P for paragraph, and then we'll use the HTML copyright symbol. So that's ampersand copy semicolon, and then the gym, comma 2017. Or you can put 2000 and whatever if you're watching this after 2017. And that does it for all of our HTML. I'm just going to get rid of some of the space here we have in the document, and then we'll be ready to move over to our style sheet with style.css to kind of lay out all of this basic HTML content that we have in the version we've been working on here in Google Chrome, so we can start to see the website really take its form as we add the styles. And let's just take a quick look at the finished version with how the animation will display for us before we move over to style.css. So I'll just refresh it, and then we'll see all of the sections sort of scroll in here. All right, so what we're going to do is we're going to lay out all of the sections using the CSS, and then we'll go back over to the HTML document and add the animation once all of the sections are kind of laid out for us, so we can really watch the animation take effect, and it's going to be the best learning experience this way also. Alright, so let's take a look at this style information here that's already included for us in the style sheet there. So the asterisk is called a reset style. So that's going to span the entire HTML document itself and do away with any inherent padding or margin or border that a web browser wants to put on the HTML document itself by default. So now let's drop down and let's style the body of the website. So as you may have noticed here, the body of the website, it's not completely white, so we'll want to give that a little bit of color. Alright, so just write body so we can reference the body tag, and then the background color for this, as I said, it's going to be a little off-white, so it's F0, F0, F0. Now all white is just plain F, and then the font color is sort of like a dark gray, it's not quite black, and the hex value, which is the hashtag and then the numbers that we're seeing, is 555. Now let's give it the font family. So let's just reference the second Google font at the top, which is the Ubuntu condensed font family. And then the backup font for that is sans serif. Alright, so now if we refresh, we see that our fonts have taken some form here. And now let's give the text a line height. So we're going to give it a line height of 190% to space out the lines of text a little bit. And then we'll tell it to align center and text transform uppercase. So now if we refresh, everything's going to be centered and uppercase. So later we'll add a different style for the paragraph text, but we're going to keep this for all of the heading text. And we've got our heading 3s up here in the 1/3 sections, our heading 4s down here in the unordered list, and then in the footer with the navigation we have heading 5s that are links. So let's start with our heading 3 style. And let's take a quick look at where that's going to display. So that's the grade A staff here for starters with the heading 3. So let's locate that in the HTML. Okay, so here we go. And we're going to give that a font size of 190%. Then to create some padding on the top and bottom, we'll give it padding 5% top bottom, 0 left right. So the 190%, and as you can see there's padding on the top and the bottom, 190% is of the inherent font size for Google Chrome, which is 16 pixels. Alright, so let's do our heading 4 now, which is inside of the unordered list for the R facility text here, or facility amenities. So we'll give that a font size of 170%. And then we'll give it the same padding of 5% top bottom and 0 left right. Okay, and then let's refresh. Okay, so right now it's going to look really spaced out, but later when we style the list itself, it won't look so crazy like that. So let's do the heading 5 now at the bottom, and we'll give this a font size of 120%, and let's give it a color that's not going to display right now, but we're going to give it the same gray color that it'll have later on in the footer. So that 959595 is kind of gray. And let's add some spaces in between these dashes, which I forgot one. So it spaces out a little bit more. Okay, there we go. Alright, so now let's go ahead and style our images a little bit here. So if we size a website down some, we'll notice that the images don't flex down with the width of the website. They're going to stay at their full width. So we'll just do a simple style for the images, which if you remember in the HTML are the img src tags. So we'll just reference that with img. And we're going to give them a max width of 100%. So they can never display at a larger percentage than the width of the screen. So max width 100%, and then if we check, we'll find that the images are always 100% of the screen up to their full size. So they're not going to stay at 100%, except later we'll make it so the navigation image does. Alright, so now let's move on to our header. So the header is this blue section at the top of the website, just above the slider, and then we'll have the logo and the navigation inside of there. Alright, so in our HTML, we reference the header with just the HTML5 tag header, and that's what we'll do here in the CSS. So just write header, open and close the swirly brackets, and then let's give it the blue background color. So just write background hashtag 405580, and if we refresh, there we have the whole sort of top section there in blue. Now let's give it its height. So we're going to have a height of 86 pixels. Alright, so now if we refresh, so it has the appropriate height, but the navigation is kind of not all the way in there. And then let's tell it position fixed, so it stays in the same spot on the screen. So right now we can't see it, or well, we can after the image slider. So let's fix that with z index. So z index 1000 will make it so it displays on top of everything else. So it's on top of the slider now, but it's not 100% width. So we'll just add that. Okay, so there we go. And let's make it a little bit transparent like the original. So let's give it an opacity of 0.9 or 90%. And then there we go. Now it's kind of looking like the original there. Alright, so now if you remember, when we sized the website up, the logo and the navigation stay centered on the page and have a max width here, which is 1200 pixels. And the way we're able to do that is with the header inner, which will wrap around, as I said, the logo and the navigation. So let's reference that now. So that's an ID, so we'll reference that with the hashtag and then header-inner, and we'll give that the max width, as I said, of 1200 pixels. And then to center it on the page, we'll say margin 0 auto. Alright, so now if we refresh, we're not going to see any difference with the navigation yet because we don't have the logo off to the side or the navigation. So let's go ahead and do that, and then we'll kind of see the header inner take effect. So our logo is an ID, so reference that with the hashtag. And we're going to make this logo appear by using a background URL. So we have the logo image. So let's write background URL, and then in the parentheses we'll reference that image. So img / for the folder, the dash gym.png, and then let's tell it to float to the left side of the screen, or push left, and we'll give it a width of 200 pixels and a height of 60 pixels. And let's check it out. So basically the height and width here is giving it a window for the background image to display. So now we can see the header inner taking effect with that staying centered. And let's also give that some margin. So we'll give it margin of 20 pixels all around. And if we refresh, there we have it with some margin, and it looks pretty close to the original here. Alright, so let's move over and style the next thing in line, which is our navigation. So if you remember from the HTML, our navigation is referenced with the HTML5 tag nav, N-A-V, and that's going to be for the whole navigation here. So let's take a quick look at it in the HTML. So here we have it. Alright. So for our navigation, we'll want to float that off to the right side of the screen rather than the left like the logo, and then we'll give this a padding on the top right, and we don't need any padding on the bottom or the left. So 35 pixels on the top, 20 pixels on the right, and then 0 bottom and 0 left. So now if we refresh, we have it with the padding and pushing off to the right, but we need the list items inside of the unordered list for the navigation to display in line. So before we do that, let's reference the icon since it's kind of next in our HTML. So this is the menu icon that when we hover over it, it's going to display the unordered list on the mobile version. So right now, let's style the menu icon, but we're not actually going to see it until we're doing the rest of the mobile style later on. So we'll reference that with the div ID menu-icon, and then the image for this is just icon.png, and we'll want that to center. Alright, and then we'll give it a width of 40 pixels and a height of 34 pixels. And for now, since as I said we're not going to see it until we're styling the mobile version, we just want it to display hidden. Alright, so it's not going to show up now, so let's write display hidden. And then later we'll be changing this style. Okay, so now let's drop down and get started with the rest of the navigation, starting with our unordered list here, or UL, and then we'll do the list items. So the UL contains all of the lists, and then each individual link is a list item here. So let's reference the UL, or unordered list, and then we're going to tell it to have a list style none, which is going to take away the dots that we're seeing off to the left of the list items. Okay, and then let's reference the actual list item itself. So for that, we'll go with nav ul li, and then let's give it a font family here. So we're just going to have this a font family of sans serif, nothing special. We're not using any of the Google fonts for it. And then we'll tell it to display inline block, which will make it display inline next to one another here. So there we go. And now let's give it some padding to space them out a bit. So padding of 10 pixels all around. Okay. And we'll have the list items themselves float to the left within the unordered list itself. So it's still going to be off to the right side of the screen. And then let's give them a font size of 110% of the inherent 16 pixels. Alright, so let's drop down and style the links inside of the list items that we're seeing here. So right now they're just displaying in this blue shade, which is kind of the default for links in HTML. So let's reference that with nav ul li a for the links, and then let's give it a color of off-white, the same color as the background of the website. So that's F0, 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 and if you remember, all white is just plain F, or 3 Fs. And then text decoration none to get rid of the underline, and let's give it a font weight of 700, which is going to make it bold. That's like the equivalent of a bold font weight. Alright, so now when we refresh, there we have it looking very similar to the original there. Let's go ahead and just style the current menu item and the hover. So just write a:hover for when we hover over the link, and we'll say text decoration underline when we hover over it. Alright, and now let's do the current. So let me just show you really quickly. So here for the first list item, index.html, since we're on this page, has a class current. So if you create other pages, you'll want to change that to the other navigation link. Alright, so current text decoration underline. And now if we refresh, we have home, the first link there, to index.html underlined. And what we can actually do is, we don't need to write a second style for this. Let me just show you a real quick trick. So just write comma dot current after a:hover, since it's the same style, and then if you refresh, you'll see that it still displays for us properly there. Alright, so let's drop down, and now we can move on to the image slider. So I'm just going to create a quick comment or note here in the CSS saying that our slider is now starting. So it's up to you if you want to do this. You can create a little separation between kind of the main things that you're styling to make it easier to navigate style.css. So I'll just add another one here above the navigation. And alright, so let's get started with our slider style. Let's jump back over to index.html so we can see what we're styling here. So what we're going to style is the section class slider, and we're going to give that some margin on the top of it. So if you see here, right now our header is kind of on top of the slider images as compared to the original. So we'll just add some margin on top of the slider. So we'll reference that with dot slider since it's a class, and then margin top 90 pixels. Alright, so now if we refresh, we'll see that the slider images have dropped down, but the header has also. So we'll correct that pretty simply here. So go back up to header, and what we'll do is just write top 0. So there's 0 separation between that header and the top of the browser. Alright, so that pulls our header back up, and now we have the slider displaying properly underneath that. So everything looks good. Let's just get rid of the little previous and next links underneath it. So just write, and that's these right here. So just write .bx-controls display none. Alright, so that's all we need to do for our slider, actually, because the image style that we added earlier will make it display properly at 100% of the width. So there we go. When we size it down, it's fitting right in with the browser. Alright, so I'm just going to create another note here that our inner wrapper is starting. So start inner wrapper. So if you remember from the original or finished version, the inner wrapper is what contains all of the content in the body of the website to make it so it can only flex up to 1200 pixels, similar to the wrapper that we had inside of the header. So that's going to center all of our content, and it's going to span all of the white section that we're seeing, or throughout all of the white section. Alright, so that is an ID, and we'll reference that with the hashtag, and then inner dash wrapper. So let's just see where that is here. Alright, so here's our div ID inner wrapper, and that will lead us all the way down to just above where the footer is, right here, where we created that comment. Alright, so again, the hashtag or pound inner dash wrapper, and then this will be the same as what we did for the header, the inner for the header. So it's max width 1200 pixels, and then to center it, we'll use margin 0 auto. Okay, so now if we refresh, you'll see that the paragraph text that right now it's displaying at full width, it's going to be narrowed down. So there we go. So that's our 1200 pixel mark for the inner wrapper. Okay. So let's move on to the first of our elements inside of the inner wrapper, which are these 1/3 section classes here. So we'll have 3 1/3 sections, and we can style them all at once by referencing the 1/3 class here. So here is our first section class 1/3. Right, so we'll reference that with period 1-3rd, since it's a class rather than an ID, and then let's give that a width of 29%, and we'll tell it to float or push to the left. And we're going to have, this is going to style a bunch of the page actually, because we have several 1/3 classes. Alright, so now we have them displaying at the 29%. Now let's go ahead and tell them to float left, so you can see them kind of push next to each other off to the left. Alright, and then we'll want a little bit of separation between them. So the reason why we use 29% rather than 33.3% is because we want the separation between them. So let's give them a margin of 2%. All right, so that looks pretty good and centered with some good space between the sections. All right, so now let's do the circle. So this is going to be the big blue circle that the icon sits on top of. So that, if you remember, is just a div class circle. So we don't need to reference it any differently than we would a section class, since they're all classes. So just write period, circle. And the first thing that we'll do is let's lay out the height and the width of the circle. So the width and height will be 150 pixels, and then we'll give it the blue background color that we use for the header also. So that is 405580. All right, so let's go and refresh. And there we have, actually the icon color is showing up rather than the background color. And let's center that. So just write margin 0 auto and then refresh. Okay, so now it's centered. And then let's change the color to background. All right, so now we have our squares laid out, not quite circles yet. So what we'll do to make it a circle is we're just going to give it a border radius. So let's give it a border radius of 50%. All right, and now if we refresh, there we have our circles. So the next thing that we'll do is let's style the icons that are inside of the circles. So these are the font awesome icons that we used for these 1/3 sections, as well as the social media icons in the footer of the website. So we'll reference those with 1/3 I, since it's the I inside of the 1/3 class. So dot 1/3 dash I, and then let's give them the same off-white color we've been using. So that's F0, F0, F0. All right, so now if we refresh, there we have the icons in white, but they're still pretty small, so let's give them a font size. So the font size is going to seem pretty big percentage-wise. Let's give it a font size of 555%. Oh, whoops. I have a hashtag rather than the percentage. Alright, so there we have it. And now to center it, let's give it a little bit of padding. So we'll just give it a padding of 20 pixels. Actually, change this to percentage. I think that's going to look closer to the original. And if we refresh, there we have our icons nice and centered inside of the circle class, just like the original. So let's move down and work on our paragraph text next. So we'll want to do away with the text transformation uppercase, and we'll also do away with the centered text. So we'll reference the paragraphs with just the letter P. So if you remember, the paragraphs in HTML are just the P tag. All right, and let's give them the font family, which the Google font, which isn't the one for the headings. So that's going to be the Droid Sans font. So in a single quote, write Droid Sans, and then comma sans dash serif as the backup font, and write text align justify. So this is going to do away with the centered text and give it the newspaper feel where it sort of lines up to the edge, making the 1/3 sections kind of boxy for us there. And then let's do away with the text transformation uppercase by just writing text transform none, and we'll want them the paragraph font a little bigger. So write font size 125%. All right, and then lastly, let's add a little bit of padding to space out the lines. So write padding 2%. You could also do that with a line height. Okay, so that looks good. So if we scroll down the page, what we'll notice is that we have a fair amount of padding on the original in between the sections, and that we're seeing right here above the 1/3 sections, for example. And at the bottom of the version we're working on, we'll find that some of the stuff, sections of the page might kind of overflow and are in line with other sections. So to correct that, we'll reference our div class clearfix. So this is going to be a simple style, basically telling it to create a horizontal rule here where nothing can display in line with that div class, and we'll add some padding to it. So just write dot clearfix for the clearfix class, and then write clear both so nothing can display on either side of it, and then padding 2%. Okay, so there we have some padding, and everything is looking nice and neat. Okay, great. So the next thing that we'll do is let's jump down to the gym sort of classes image here that we're going to display on the left side, and we'll make it sort of oval in shape. So that, if you remember, was nested within our article HTML5 tag that we used here. So just reference that with article, and then we'll tell it to float to the left, and we'll give it a width of 50%. And let's give it some padding also. So padding of 4% all around. Okay, so refresh, and now we have the image displaying in the proper location. But what we'll need to do, similar to what we did with the circle class for the icons, is let's give that image some border radius. So in our HTML, we used circle-image as a class for that image, and let's just give it a border radius of 70%. So this is going to create the oval shape. And you can play around with the percentage if you like. If you want it to be a perfect circle, you could do 50%. Anything less than 50%, it's going to be kind of like a just a rounded square. Alright, and then anything I think 60% or over will kind of give us this oval shape that we're seeing here. So I'll just put it back to 70. Alright, and let's drop down and do our right column section here, which we used an aside tag for. So we'll style the aside tag itself and then the headings that are inside of there. Alright, so just write aside float right, since we want it to push off to the right side of the screen, and then we'll give that a width of 35% and a padding of 2% all around. Okay, so that kind of pulled all of our heading 4s in there together, but let's style the heading 3. So let's just set it apart from the heading 4s by giving it an underlined decoration. So aside H3 text decoration underline. Okay, so there we have it, underline, just to, as I said, separate it from the heading 4s beneath it. Okay. So moving down the page, these 1/3 sections with the heading 3 image and paragraph text look pretty good. Let's just add a little bit of padding underneath the images. So it's not lining up perfectly like the original. We can see there's a little bit of a gap in between the images and the paragraphs. So to add that padding, let's reference the 1/3 class. So .1-3 image, and then padding bottom 2%. Okay, and then refresh. Alright, so that's looking just like the original. So now we can drop down and let's get started on the style for our footer section here that we're seeing in the gray on the original. Okay, so I'm just going to create another comment saying that our footer section is starting, to separate it from the rest of our style here. So start footer. Alright, so let's drop down and start off with the actual footer tag. Alright, so here towards the bottom of our HTML document, let's see, here is our footer tag, and then inside of that we'll have our footer inner. So let's give a background color to our footer. So that's going to be this gray shade that we're seeing, which is going to span 100% of the screen. Alright. So let's write background . And then the gray shade is 333. Alright, so now if we refresh it, there we have the footer, but some of the stuff isn't showing up underneath. So let's add a style called overflow hidden and refresh. Alright. So that's good. And then let's give it an a bit of an opacity, so all of the colors kind of mesh a little bit with that gray shade. Let's give it an opacity of 0.9. And then refresh. Okay, so that's like a little lighter. Alright, good. So now let's go ahead and add the footer inner div ID style. So similar to what we did with the header, and then in the body of the section, we'll have a footer inner to give it a max width and center the content. So just write hashtag footer dash inner, and then max width 1200 pixels, and then if we refresh, it's going to be at a max width, but it's pushed off to the left. So now let's just center it like we did before with margin 0 auto. Alright, so now when we refresh, there we have all of our content inside of the footer shifting off to the middle of the page. So now let's drop down and reference our 1/3 sections inside of the footer. So write footer dot 1-third. And let's give the 1/3 sections here. So section class 1/3 inside of the footer, a width of 33%, and then we'll give it a margin of 2% top bottom and 0 left right. Alright, so that's going to space it out on the top and bottom slightly. And now let's do our heading 3s. So as you can see here, the text in the finished version is a little lighter. So let's reference that with footer H3, open and close, and then color 959595, which is the light gray shade. Alright, so there we have that. And let's do our paragraph text next. So the footer paragraph text. So footer P, and then we'll give it the same color of 959595. And let's also tell it to text align center. Okay, and then refresh, and there we have the first of our 1/3 sections displaying properly, so we can move on to, actually before we go to the social section with the links, let's add the line that's in between the 1/3 sections. So if you remember in the HTML, after the section class 1/3, we have ID footer dash third. So let's reference that to add our line in between the 1/3 sections. So just write hashtag footer dash third, since it's an ID, and then we'll want to give it a border on the right side. So border dash right, and then we'll have that as 1 pixel solid, and then that same light gray shade, so 959595. So now if we refresh, there we have them lining up off to the right of both of the 1/3 section classes where we have that footer third ID included. So as you remember here, the last one, we don't have that. We have a different ID, which we'll get to later. Alright, so now let's style, so when we look at this website on the mobile version right now on a cell phone, that phone number is going to display as a blue link. So to correct that, just make the link the same gray shade. Alright? And then we'll have text decoration none, so there's no underline. Alright, so that's going to take care of the phone and the heading 5 links off to the right. Now let's do, but we're going to give more color to the heading 5 links, but let's do our social icons now. So we have the social class, so we'll reference the list items and make them display next to one another rather than on top of one another with .social for the social class, and then we'll reference the list items. So .social and then li for the list items, and we'll tell them to display inline. Alright, so now they're kind of too big for us to notice that they're going to display next to one another right now. So let's go ahead and decrease the font size for the icons. So we'll reference that with .social I, and let's make the font size 245% from, I think it was 555 that we added originally to the icons. Okay, and then let's change the padding. So we want padding 2% top and bottom, 6% left and right, and now they should display next to one another. So there we go. Looking pretty close to the original here. Let's change the color to that same light gray as the text. So that's going to be color, and then the hex value of 959595. Alright, so let's make the hover color also here. So social I colon and then hover. So when we hover over them, they turn white for us. And you can add any color that you like here. When we hover over the navigation in the footer, it's going to turn blue. So just write color F5, 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 which is an off-white. Alright, so there we go. And let's add the hover for, or actually let's add a max height and max width to this, the border. So just let's do 250 pixels for each so they both display at the same height. So max height and min height, 250 pixels for the footer dash third border. Alright. And now let's do the heading 5 link for the navigation. Let's just make those blue and make it so there's no underline when we hover over it. So here we have H5 and then A. Alright, so H5A, and then let's say text decoration none. Actually H5A hover and text decoration none, and then color, that same blue shade we've been using, which is hex value 405580. Alright, so now when we hover over our links, there we have the blue shade down here. So again, that's up to you if you want both of these, all of the links to be blue or all the links to be white. Alright, so let's create a comment saying that our footer second is starting. So the footer second is going to be just where it says copyright the gym 2017, and there's no HTML tag for it, but a lot of people refer to this section of the website as a socket, where you put terms and conditions and copyright stuff down here. So this is going to be this darker gray section. Okay, so we're going to reference that with the footer class here. So it's going to be footer.second, or the footer tag rather, and the second class. So footer.second. Whoops. Okay, and let's give that a border on the top. So border top, and it's 1 pixel solid, and then the hex value for this is going to be a little bit darker, a little darker gray shade we've been using. So it's 4D4E50 for the hex value. So now let's go back over here and refresh, and there we have kind of the start to our socket there, or footer second. So let's drop down and give it a maximum height. So we'll give it a max height of 50 pixels. Alright, so now we just have to correct some of the padding there. So write padding bottom 1%. That's good. And then we'll just change the opacity to make it the darker shade here in the footer second. So opacity 0.95. Alright, so this is going to be a little bit darker than opacity 0.9 that we gave for the footer overall. Alright, so there we have our darker footer second or socket than the rest of the footer, and that concludes all of the full width styling for the entire gym website. So let's go ahead and create a note saying that our media queries are now starting, so we can style the mobile version of the website. So just write media queries, and I'm just going to pull up the finished version and then the version that we're working on, so we can see the changes to the mobile version as we make it here. Alright, so as you can see here, when I refresh, we have some work to do on the mobile version. So let's get started with our media query. So write @media screen and in parentheses max dash width 768 pixels. Alright, and then open and close the swirly brackets, and then let's start with our header. So if you remember, we have a fixed header at the full width version, so let's make our header absolute. So position absolute. Alright, so that's going to change it from staying fixed to an absolute position where it scrolls with the rest of the website. Alright, so now let's change the menu icon from display none originally to having it display. Alright, so menu icon display inline block. Alright, and then let's add a little bit more stuff here. We're not going to see the menu icon just yet, so let's write nav hover UL for unordered list and display block So nav hover UL, and rather than having it display inline, we're going to have it display block. So the list items are on top of one another rather than lining up. So now if we refresh, we see the menu icon displaying, but it's kind of off to the side here. And we have a little more work to do. So let's drop down another line. And let's reference the unordered list again. So write nav ul and then comma nav colon active ul. And what we're going to do here is we're going to make it so the unordered list doesn't display unless we hover over the menu icon. So we're going to have it display none until we hover over the icon. So as you can see right now, it's kind of fidgety, but we can see that it is starting to display as we hover over the menu icon. So let's add some more style here to correct that. So let's start with the Z index. So write Z index 1000 to make sure that it displays on top of everything else. Then we'll give it a position absolute. Alright, so now you can see it's kind of off to the side here. And then let's give it a background color, that blue shade. So that's 405580 with the hex value. Okay, so there we have it. And then let's give it a width of 50% of the screen. And it's still going to be, so it's still kind of off to the right here, off to the side of the page. So let's give it padding of 20 pixels all around. And then let's tell it to have, so now you see there's padding around the actual unordered list, like so the actual blue box is bigger, but now let's push it off to the left. So let's write right 20 pixels to create 20 pixels of space between kind of the blue box and the right side of the screen. And then the top will do 60 pixels. Okay, so there we have it. Now it's displaying pretty good, but we need to correct the list items in a sec. First, let's add a border. So the original has a white border around the unordered list, around the blue shade. So just write border 1 pixel, 1 pixel solid, and then FFF for white. Alright, so there we have a little border displaying around it. And then let's just give a little border radius to it. So border radius will go top right 4 pixels, bottom right 0, bottom left 4 pixels, and then top left 4 pixels. Okay, actually, sorry. So it's top right that has the 0. That's right. Alright, so let's drop down and let's do our list items now. So we'll want these centered and to take up the full width of the unordered list. So just write nav li and then text align center and width 100%. Alright, and then refresh. Okay, so there we have it. Now it's displaying just like the original here, as far as I can tell. Alright, so let's drop down, and the first thing underneath the navigation that we'll style, since we don't need to do anything to the image slider, will be our 1/3 sections that contain the icons and the headings and paragraphs. So let's give that 1/3 section a width of 100%, and that's going to be a major change for us throughout the website here. And then let's just say margin 0. Okay, and then refresh. Alright. So now let's do the circles. So the blue circle and the icons. So let's change the width of those from 150 pixels to 100 pixels for the circle class. So width and height 100 pixels, and then we'll do the icons. So right now the icons are going to be bigger than the circles, but drop down and write the 1/3 class, so .1-third I for the icons, and then let's make the font size 360% from the 555% originally. Alright, so there we go. Okay, that's good. Alright, so let's drop down and do the article section here. So we'll get to the paragraph text and the headings later, and I'll tell you why in a bit. Alright, so let's give the article a width of 100% also, and then we'll give it padding 0 and margin 0. So that's going to make the circular image or oval image take up 100% of the screen here. Alright, so there we go. Okay, and now let's do the aside. So this is simple. Again, let's just give it a width of 100% of the screen here for the our facility text, and then the heading for unordered list underneath it. Okay, and again with or we'll do the heading 3s later, but let's change the heading 4s to a smaller size at this point. Okay, so write H4 and then font size 140% from, I believe it was 170% originally. Okay, so there we have it. Later we'll actually decrease that size even more, along with the rest of the headings and the paragraph text. Okay, so most of the website is looking pretty good and styled with the 100% widths we've given it so far for the various sections. But once we get down to the footer section, we'll have a little more work to do for the mobile version here. So underneath the H4 style, let's reference the footer 1/3 section. So footer.1/3, and let's give that a width of 100% also, and then margin 0. So now refresh. Okay, so that's starting to take its form a bit. Alright, and now let's change the icon size. So write social I to reference these icons, and let's just make those smaller. So .social I, and then font size 245%. Alright, so there we go. And let's do the lines. So the borders that display in between the 1/3 sections, let's change those from border right to border bottom. So write footer dash third for the div ID, and let's create some border here, changing it from kind of vertical to horizontal. So let's change the minimum height also to 150 pixels from 250 pixels, so it's not so spaced out. Okay, that looks a little better. And then let's do padding bottom to create a little space of 10%. And then we can add the border bottom. Alright, so that's going to space it out a little bit. And then border dash bottom. One pixel solid, and again it's the light gray hex value 959595. Alright, so there we have it, looking pretty good. Let's just add a little separation underneath the heading 5 links here. So we can do that with referencing the footer third last ID. Alright, so footer third last, and then let's give it a margin bottom of 15%. Okay, and refresh. And whoops, so I did class. We'll just need to change the period to the hashtag since it's an ID. Alright, so footer dash third dash last, margin bottom 15%. And there we have it, displaying pretty close to the original. So the only thing that we're going to do now with the media queries is we're going to create a second one. So this is going to change, as we know, at 768 pixels, but when it gets down to an iPhone portrait type width, let's make the headings and the paragraph text a little smaller. So let's create a second media query here. So write media screen and max dash width 478 pixels. And then open and close your swirly brackets, and let's start with our heading 3s. So let's take the font size from 190% to 150%. And then if we refresh, there we have our heading 3s looking a little more fitting to this size screen. And then let's do our paragraph size. So let's do a font size of 100% from, I believe it may have been 120 or 125. And then margin 2% to create some separation on the sides there. Okay, so that's looking pretty good. And then last but not least, we have the heading 4s for the unordered list with the gym facilities that we'll just make a little smaller. So that's this text right here. So write H4, and then let's give that a font size of 115%, down from the 140% in the 768 pixel width media query. Alright, so there we go. It's up to you if you want to change the heading 5 at the very bottom in the footer for the links, but I think this looks pretty good. So let's get rid of the extra space here if you have it in our style sheet, and it's time to move over to adding the animation to our website. So let's just remind ourselves real quick what the animation looks like on the finished version here. So if we scroll down, here we have the sections kind of floating in, and then the whole footer section at the bottom. So as we work through the animation, you'll learn that you can create your own animations for this, or kind of use whatever animated version of it you want for how you want the sections or the text to float into the screen. I just use some basic ones here, but you can kind of go crazy with it and animate every little last detail if you wanted to, or make it different for the mobile version. Alright, so I'm just kind of checking this out on some different widths, and then what we'll want to do to get started with the animation is go back over to index.html to get started. Okay, and once we open up index.html, all we'll need to do to get started here is add a little bit of information to the head section of the website. So we're going to reference some files that we have included for us already inside of the starter files. So go into the CSS folder and we'll reference the waypoints and animation CSS. Alright, and I'll explain what each one does in just a sec. So let's go ahead and reference using the link rel style sheet text /CSS, and then do the CSS folder and animate.css. So animate.css is for the actual animations that display. Waypoints.css is what allows it to delay the animation to when we get down to that section of the screen. Alright, so this one is CSS / for the folder waypoints.css. Alright, and before we reference the JavaScript or jQuery files here, let's give credit where credit is due. So the person that created waypoints.js that we're going to be using to delay the animation is called Harry Constantoricus. I hope I'm saying that right. So if you need to give somebody credit for this waypoints, go ahead and give it to Harry. Alright, so let's go ahead and reference the waypoints script here. So do JS / for the JavaScript folder, and then jQuery.waypoints.min.js, and then type text / JavaScript. Alright, and then I'm just going to copy that, and let's change a little bit of this so we have simply waypoints.js as well. Okay, so once we have waypoints.js entered, let's scroll down in the HTML document here, just underneath the image slider where the inner wrapper starts. So what we're going to reference first is where the waypoints delayed animation will start. So let's create a quick comment here in our HTML saying start waypoints delayed animation. Okay, so this is going to span the rest of the HTML document because all of the animated sections inside of this will be delayed. Alright, so then create a section class and this class is called staggered dash animation dash container. Alright, and then go ahead and just highlight and cut the ending section here, or you can just copy the whole thing. And what we'll do is we'll drop down way to the bottom of the website, just underneath the footer, and I'm going to paste that and just make this the ending section tag or closing section tag, and then change it to end waypoints delayed animation. So again, everything inside of here, when we add a animation to it now, has the ability to be delayed. And you can do away with the BR tag at the very bottom if you have it. That's not necessary. Alright, so let's start our first animation here. So what we're going to do is we're going to wrap the first 1/3 section that we have with some animation. So that's this section here with grade A staff. So that, as you see, is going to kind of slide in from left to right when we refresh the page. Alright, so let's start with a section class. So we'll use the section tag here, and we'll call this section class os-animation, and then space data-os-animation equals fade capital I-N capital L-E-F-T capital B-I-G. So fade in left big, and make sure you get the capitalizations here. And then write data-os-animation-delay, and we're going to delay this animation by 0.3 seconds. Okay, and you can close that section class, and then we'll just close the tag here, close the actual section here. Alright. So now let's go ahead and just refresh our page to see that our first animation is starting. And so you don't confuse the sections here, you can also just create a quick comment saying this is where the animation ends. Alright, so let's go to the version we've been working on, and if we refresh, there we have the first section that's animated scrolling in here off to the side. Alright, so now that we know how to add an animation, and we're going to lay out the rest of the page here, but I want to show you how you can pick your own animations here. So if you just do a quick Google search for animate.css, there's a splash page here where you can select a number of different animations, and the one that we're using right now, as you see here, is fade in left big. So you can choose from any one of these, and where we entered fade in left big, just enter whatever the text is here that you want to use for your animation. Alright, so let's drop down, and rather than type this section class out again for the opening tag of the animation, let's go ahead and paste it for our second 1/3 section, and I'm just going to change left big to down big, and then we'll end the animated section. Okay, and then we can do the same thing for the third of the 1/3s. and we'll just change it to fade in right big. So if you really want to go crazy with this, what you can do is animate the circle class, the heading 3, the paragraph text, and just be aware that when you do this animation, it's also going to show up on the mobile version. So a nice approach and clean approach to animation is to just do kind of a really light fade in from the top rather than going crazy like we are here, which I'm kind of just doing to show you how many different effects there are. Alright, so let's check out how all of them will come in together here. Okay, that's good. So yeah, you might consider trying like fade in down small, if there's such a thing, rather than big, which will be like a really nice clean looking animation for a business type website. Alright, so let's go ahead and copy this again and move down to the article tag on the left with this oval image. And let's do fade in left. And then I'll just end the animation here after the article tag. Alright, and then refresh. Okay. Okay. So now sometimes when you refresh it, you'll find that the 1/3 sections don't animate until you scroll down, but that depends on the size of the screen or the browser window. So what you could do if you wanted is you could put the start of the waypoints a little higher in the HTML for that. Alright, and then let's just do fade in right for the aside here, and then refresh. Okay, so there we go. Alright, and then let's do these 1/3 sections underneath it. So we can also try to change the delay here. You can mess with how many seconds it takes to come in. So as you can see, the 1/3 section off to the left took a little longer in this case. So there it comes in after the other ones. So as I said, just play around with it and see what you like the best and experiment with the different animations at animate.css. So let's go ahead and do the animations for the rest of the 1/3 sections, and then we'll do the footer. Right, so I'm just going to paste in this section class OAS animation again, and then let's change fade in left to or the first one is going to be bounce in left. That's right. Alright, and then let me just end the section here. So bear with me here. If you need to, just pause it for a second so you can catch up with the animations. Okay, so let me just refresh. Alright, so I'm just going to change this to bounce in left, and then we'll stick with that with these 1/3 sections. They'll all have a bounce animation related to them. So let me just close out the other two here, and then we'll add the bounce animation. So this is going to be bounce in down, and then the last will be bounce in right. So as I said, just pause the screen if you need to for a moment to catch this. Oh, so here we go again with the capitalization being important. So you'll want to just make the B lowercase here. All right, so there we go. So now let's take a look at it so far as we scroll down. Okay, so it's pretty bouncy at the bottom. You might just want to change the delay on that also. So now let's just wrap the entire footer section with an animation. And this one is going to be kind of off the wall. I probably wouldn't use this if you're creating a website for somebody. But as I said, just to show you how crazy you can get with the animations, let's do the zoom in animation for the entire footer section here. Okay, so I'll go back up to OS-animation and change bounce in right to zoom in down. Alright, and then refresh. And there we have the footer section zooming in, kind of almost bouncing up at us. So let's take one more look at the animated sections here as we scroll down through the website to see what we've created. So that does it, you guys. Thanks so much for sticking around with me for a full 2.5 hours. If you haven't done so already, please do subscribe and check out the full version of the template in the video description. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.